So I've got to start with when you were casting the film, who kind of came on first? Did you find, was it Steven
Steven, yeah, he was the lead.
Was he the first one you found, or how did it work?
He was actually one of the last.
Really?
Yeah. Our initial casting process started a year before we actually shot it. We thought we had a date, but then funding was more challenging to get than we thought. So it was like a year later that we emailed everybody say, hey, we're actually doing this movie now. Remember this movie you auditioned for, a year ago. Almost all of them were from Central Florida, where we filmed it at, either Orlando or Tampa. And I found them through breakdown services online, through some auditions, a couple of agents, or like Steven, I had posted it on a Facebook group, actors Facebook group in Atlanta, and he found it and sent in a tape, and he was really the first one that I felt captured this character, that it was right away. So.
One of the elements I love in the movie is the changing the song with the one word, and that being, I think, a beautiful moment at the end of the film where we get kind of the oomph to the guy.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Was that something you've done before, or is that something from real life? I mean, I love that.
Thanks. Well, I always, whenever I've had a regular job and being at a workplace, I always just I would just sing random lines to songs or whatever and inject them into a conversation. But I think for that one, that line came from, that was the original title of the movie, was "This is the Gay the Lord has made."
Oh, really?
And that's when I first came up with the idea for the movie, that was, that title is really what propelled me and kept me inspired to keep writing, and it was the first real excited about this movie. I knew that wasn't going to be the actual title of the movie, because that just wouldn't really work. But I definitely wanted a way. I felt like that one line really encapsulates what the whole movie. So I wanted a way to fit that in, and that seemed like a really fun way to do it. So those are some fun scenes to shoot, and fun scenes to write, to figure out of all the thousands and millions of songs that I've written, which ones would work for this movie. That was fun.
How much did the actors enjoy it? Because I think they all seem to really enjoy their songs. And
they did, and a few of them actually gave suggestions, and we switched a few. One or two of them we switched on the day of shooting. Some of them were not thrilled, and some of them didn't even had not known the songs until we show up on set and you're like, "You ready to sing this song?" We're like, "No, I don't know this song." I don't know. They're all so popular. I didn't know how that was possible, but so that was an interesting. And Paul Salo, who plays Bruce, at one of the film festivals, they asked him what was the hardest or scariest part about that, and he said singing, for sure. I think he was terrified to sing, but I love it. I love those scenes.
Yeah, it's one of the sweeter scenes when he sings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask: Is there a real life Ryan's Home? Was there a real life inspiration for this, or did it just kind of come about as an idea that you were thinking, this type of stuff happens out there, and I want to put some light on it? I mean, where did it come from?
Well, the Zebra Coalition is an actual LGBT youth resource center in Orlando. That's where we filmed. The story kind of takes us through there. So when I found that organization, that really kind of shaped the story a little bit, for sure. There's not in Lakeland. There's not a Ryan's Home yet. This movie has certainly inspired. There had been talks about needing something like that in Lakeland, and right now, if there are LGBT youth that are kicked out of their home or have to leave because they feel unsafe, there's smaller houses, just individual houses. There's a network of people who find them places to stay, but there's not an actual specific shelter for them. But the actual story of Ryan was based on a true story of Ryan Skipper, who was murdered in a hate crime in 2007 in our county. And so his parents graciously allowed us to use the name Ryan, and that's how we honored them and his story. Changed the details about how it all went down, but that was so for us, for Lakeland, for Polk County, that name Ryan has a special meaning for sure. And you can actually see at the end of the movie there's his pictures on a wall as a way to give him some honor there. So that definitely inspired that part of it, but there's not one yet.
It's sad to say this, but we're from Texas, and we've experienced those stories too, and it's reflective, I think, of the whole country and the South in particular.
Yeah.
I know this is sent in a place but have you been amazed at how universal, sadly, this story is? I think a lot of people can connect with it, not just folks that are from Florida.
Yeah, definitely, and I've seen it definitely more in the South or in the Bible Belt. I feel like that's where this story connects with both with the LGBTQ community, who still has a tighter struggle going on, and with heterosexual people who are, Christians, who are still have that kind of more conservative mindset, but their heart is opening a little bit, and they're starting to see some of that theology. They're starting to have questions, and in the South, I feel like that's where that tension is a little bit more, and there's been a much stronger response in that part of the world. It's funny. It's not funny, but when we first started doing this movie, where I wrote it was in 2014, and then 2015, marriage equality passed in the country, and so my ridiculous self-thought, we had moved past this, and maybe the window had closed on this kind of story, but clearly that's not the case, and it's probably just as important now as it ever has been.
Probably more, yeah, now that it's taken steps back. Even though we talked about how universal it is, I would love to know, we talked a little bit about it on the red carpet, how important it is that you are showing Florida films, stuff that that is in your backyard. Tell me a bit about being able to film at home and the experience of that, and tell a story that's right there locally for you that you hope will transcend out, but it's got to feel comfort that you can make films where you live.
Yeah, and I feel like for filmmakers, there's this kind of general idea that like you have to go to New York or LA or Atlanta now to you have to go where the films are. And I feel like for certain aspects of the industry, you have to do that. But if you want to tell your own stories and you are willing to take whatever sacrifices and for it to take as long as it possibly can, I feel like it's a much more magical thing to do it where you live. So from a personal standpoint, it's much more satisfying to do it with the community that you live in. And we had an amazing sense of community and volunteers come out to support the movie, from production staff, from locations, from donating food for every day on set. All of that, I couldn't have done it if it wasn't in my community. We didn't have any sort of budget to be able to pay for those things like you normally would. But I feel like it just has that extra personal touch that we know this city. We know this is like a story that this city is kind of going through at the same time as our character is. And so I think it has a little bit deeper meaning, and it's a little more intimate that way.
When you were growing up, did you always have the idea that you wanted to make films, or was there a seminal moment where maybe you watched a film in particular, or a certain director, certain actor? What kind of sparked your interest in this medium?
Yeah, I grew up loving film, but I was in a pretty conservative Christian home, so and in like a smaller county in Gloucester, Virginia. So I didn't even realize that filmmaking was like a career option. Movies were this magical thing that happened in a far off land and showed up in your movie theater, in your Blockbuster. So I loved them, but I never thought that was a career possibility. And it wasn't until I started making short original content. I was on staff at a church, and we would use original content quite often. And I started doing these short films about 10 years ago, and realized, wow, I love this. This is a creative outlet that really feeds me. That it can be exhausting at times, but it is so fulfilling. And when I'm on set, or when I'm editing, or when I'm showing this final thing to an audience, that is what I want to do with my life. So yeah, it wasn't until late 20s, early 30s that I really honed in on this is what I want to make my life about. So I didn't go to film school. Everything was self-taught, that whole process, learning as I go. And that's really how I came into filmmaking.
Is there, I think there's a, obviously your belief and your love in God is one thing, and then you showcase how the church can be a negative, but also can be a positive for people in the community. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the impact of you don't have to choose one or the other, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, one of the biggest revelations for me is how wide faith is. How wide and deep this thing is. So, I feel like a lot of denominations or a lot of local churches, for whatever reason, whether it's out of fear or whatever, like stay so isolated within themselves, their denomination, and don't expand out that. And maybe they don't mean to as adults, but as a kid growing up in that led me to believe I have to stay within my family. You got to stay within the family, within this community. So realizing how different faith traditions within Christianity, different Christian faith traditions, have been fully inclusive of the LGBTQ community for a very long time was like this crazy wide opening experience for me of this is not the only way to follow the teachings of Jesus. There are so many more ways to do that. And so it was really important to me in writing at the end of the day to show different ways that you can do this faith. So some of the characters and some of people's most lovable characters, Aunt Patty has her definitely own unique faith, isn't necessarily connected with a church community, and is definitely on the outlier of what most people would consider outliers, unless you are an outlier and she has shown you love. You have experienced what the real world implications of her faith and the way she lives that out are. And then one of the support group members is a pastor at a church that I feel like his character gets looked over sometimes because he doesn't get a lot of talking time about that. But he is also another character that has his own faith. He's a pastor and he supports the LGBTQ community. He was definitely inspired by some of the pastor friends that I know that have been engaged and are pushing boundaries towards love and acceptance. And then there are people like Dave and like Gordon who are grew up as part of or are continuing the institutional machine of evangelical schools or churches or whatever, and I tried to portray those as honestly as possible, not as some like villainous sort of like but coming from a place of honesty. And I feel like that's really the only way to have this conversation is to approach it from this place of honesty.
I love that you showcase like the town hall meeting in particular, like the girl, the blonde girl who speaks. It's not not everyone is just looking at it with hate. It's what they were raised.
Yeah.
And change can happen through education, can happen through learning. So I love the meaning behind the film. I was blown away by it. Kind of the end on a happy note because I think your film does that as well.
Yeah.
Which was your favorite song or particular song that you like sung in it, or do you have a particular song that you think of whenever you think of the movie?
Oh man. So.
And if you want to sing it, that's.
I won't sing it. I'm trying to think. So I mean, there's a song that actually didn't get it in. I couldn't get it into the movie. You probably won't use it, but it's "SOB" by Nathaniel Rateliff.
Yeah. Love
So
that song.
When I found that song, that was it for the first few cuts of the movie, was like the very opening song, and that just gave me the right energy again to like kind of finish out the movie. We couldn't afford it, whatever, so don't even include that. But that's what I think of first. Yeah, I feel like I can't, like I don't want to give away the moment. So, but the song that towards the end when they sing it at the end, that is definitely my favorite moment. I remember when that idea hit me of that moment, I got so happy. It was one of those things where like, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. Kind of put this character in his place for a little bit, and just be like a really strong moment for the support group to have this bond together. So that was definitely my favorite moment.
I think people will enjoy it when they get to see it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I hope so.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for bringing the film here to Oxford, and I can't wait for people to see this. I think you're showcasing a side of the LGBT community that maybe doesn't get as much focus, and so thank you for doing what you did.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks.